Hello and welcome to my workshop. So today we're going to be getting back on the Dodge M37 build. And so where we left off was getting the chassis and drivetrain complete. And now we're going to work on the body and see how much we can get on that. Alright, so let's get started. So here I'm just trying to get the final dimensions and things set up ready to get this bed structure built. So most of the bed I'm going to be doing scratch built with just a couple small vacuum form pieces. So ideally I'd like to get the floor of the bed at the exact height of where it would be on the original truck. But you're really limited with the chassis and the suspension, the axle, and all the parts, components that make up the RC car. So I'm trying to find a good compromise, get it down as low as possible, and make it look as close to the real one as possible. So these little 1, 2, 3 blocks are really helpful. They're basically it's a same as like a little small 90-degree square there. And but they stand upright on their own, so you can use them just to kind of back against the styrene that you're gluing to make sure that the thing doesn't move. So it's really critical to make sure that you have really nice 90-degree corners, and so just want to take a 90 and start checking your pieces from time to time. Otherwise you can get really off on your builds. So I thought of a couple different ways to build this side. My first thought was to make a form and vacuum form this piece, and so it has a little small angle at the top. But I thought it probably would just be quicker just to go ahead and scratch build this. So basically what I'm doing is just sanding down a piece of styrene to the angle I need, and then gluing it onto the side. Yeah, so here's making the vacuum form for the fenders. And so what I'm doing is basically making both fenders at the same time, and it's just blocks of MDF taped together, and then I sand the thing down as one, and then I can separate them, and you have two pretty much matching pieces. The other thing I did is that there's an inner and outer structure, and basically I just made the piece a little extra larger than I would normally, and I'm able to cut the inner piece and the outer piece out of that same vacuum form. Most of the bed structure is complete. Still got a lot more to go to add on to this. All the adornments on the side, the tailgate, the insides, but the basic structure is there. And what I've added in is these two little thick styrene pieces that have threaded holes in them. And what they do is they go on either side of this battery box. So what I'll end up doing is taking this battery box back out and getting it lined up so that I can have screws that go in, and then cut a hole in the bed and put like a flanged area underneath. That'll pop out, have magnets that'll hold it in place, or something like that, which will give you then access to the battery and this little battery box underneath the bed. You'll be able to see the tray, but I think it's a pretty good compromise for getting the battery back here and not having to take this body on and off every time. So a lot more to go. Possibly might get into doing some of the work in the cab. Let's see what we can get to. So the idea here is to have the battery box underneath the rear bed, and it's the box I built before fits in between the frame rails, and so I decided I was also going to use that as a way to mount the bed to the chassis. So what I'm doing now here is cutting out the hole and getting ready to figure out a way to form up the box to and make it fit to the bed. So the little screws that go into the styrene on each end and hold that box in, and then just a little small lip of styrene that I've put in there basically to hold that piece from falling through. So now moving forward to the cab, so just getting that back section, and what I ended up doing was taking styrene, cutting out the shape I wanted, putting it on the form, and then sanding it down. And so instead of having to recess and cut those in and get those fine details, I just used the styrene to help me get that shape I want. So just a couple little styrene strips right around where I made the cut to go over the chassis, and that's going to be my spacing to space out the cab from the bed. So it's the same issue that I have with the bed I have with the cab. You know, I want to get that floor down just as far as possible, but I am really limited with the chassis and all the components. It's nice to have the transfer case that does allow you to get a much larger interior inside, and this one is pretty close, but it still is up a little bit more than what I would like. The vacuum form piece in the back, and then it's just basically taking styrene, putting a little, simple little bend in it to get that shape to go down to where it tapers in for the front of the nose. So this is the hood. So I'm just taking a couple pieces of MDF, carving it down, and then coming back and cutting out a little bit of recess to get that material to go up underneath, so I can fit that piece in. So I have the sides put on, the floor here, the back wall, and I've made this little vacuum form buck for the hood. And you can see it kind of has that same piece that goes up in here as far as the round back of it. There's a slight crown to it and a little bit of taper, but it's mostly flat. So what I do have here are these temporary braces just to hold this front end in position. So what I'll do is do a vacuum form, get this piece glued down, and then I'll be able to trim off the length and then eventually come back in here and cut the arches out for the wheel wells. So let's continue on. You get a really good transition line when you have these two pieces that are going together, and it looks really close to what the hood would look like. And so what I'm ending up doing is just taking a backer to bridge the gap between the two pieces, and that way I don't have to do any kind of filling, and hopefully no glue or anything seeps through. Now that I got the hood placed in there, I need to get this window cowl. So I'm just cutting out the section right behind the hood, which will then have another piece of MDF that's formed in to give that piece of the window cowl. This little crimp brake tool, I'm not really sure what it's called, but it's really handy to make these little small bends. So in the front, where it comes down to the nose, it flares back out just a little bit, and this is where the radiator structure is built. So the radiator is recessed back underneath the hood, and it has this tapered, almost like a box that's kind of built into there. Again, just taking a razor knife, putting an angle on it, sanding it down, and that way you can get that styrene with as much surface area as possible, and really gets a good strong bond when you put the solvent glue on it. I knew it was going to be close on this, but it was really a lot closer than I thought. Basically, all the electronics are touching right up against the back side of that radiator, which is fine, but it's really didn't have any room to spare. In this a little bit more complicated form, getting the front fenders together, and it took me a couple tries back and forth before I finally get the right shape. There's some tapers and stuff in different areas, and basically you get the thing done, you look at it, and you just know something's not right. So you just keep looking and looking at your reference material until you eventually figure out what that is. So just taking the little small cutter on the end of the rotary tool and making a nice recess so that whenever the vacuum form is pulled over, I'll have a very well defined area to cut to. Making some pretty good progress on the front end here. I got the hood, this radiator back structure built, which ties in the whole front, which allows me to remove that temporary structure in the bottom. This little window cowl piece, which I still need to do a little bit of work to. It's pretty close, but I got to come back and do a little bit of a sanding down. And these blocks, which go or basically become the fenders. So what I have is, what this will end up being is the fender will, be this part right here, have a little bit that transitions over almost a flange that will be help give it some surface area to glue to the body. And I cut this channel along the outside, and so when that vacuum pulls down in, it'll be just a slight indentation in that channel. And so what I'll be able to do is come from the back side and see where that channel is, and that gives me a really nice, good straight cut line to follow. So both these fenders are ready to go, and just to do some vacuum forming and continue on with the front end. Yeah, so you can see how you have to make these forms so that you can have an area to cut back to. So I usually take a marker on the inside just to make sure that I get that line and don't lose it when I'm in the middle of a cut. And just take a razor knife or a pair of scissors or whatever you need to get to, and kind of get that thing trimmed back to the right shape. But much like the hood, I'm just taking some pieces to make almost flanges on the edge, so when I glue this piece in, it gives it a good structure, but also allows me to keep that well-defined line between the hood and this cowl. So try to camouflage this big hole where the battery box is. I'm putting in these strips, and it was intention to put the strips in the whole time, but what I'm doing is laying them down full front to back, but only gluing them to the box section, the top of it. And so when you look in there, hopefully it will trick the eye to make it look like there's nothing there, but then when you pull it out, you'll just have basically like these long pieces coming off the end of the box. So I thought about building a form to do a vacuum form of the bed, but when I started looking at the reference material, it wasn't like a new modern bed where it's stamped steel look, undulating. It almost looked like it was flat with bolted on rib sections on top. So this one looked a little more realistic to what the the actual M37 was. Yeah, so one of the challenge that I had was to make sure that I didn't actually glue the panels down that I didn't want to have glued down. So just kind of be careful with that. And then come back and put in some sections around. It's just, I think it was a C channel that I cut the edge off of to give me a really small angle iron piece, or angle piece. And so just putting some details in. So the M37 is a really cool tailgate. It has a fold down piece. It has a really nice look, but there's also this tool holder. I think it's a shovel and axe, and I'm not really sure all what's in it, but so eventually I'll have that nice tool holder, but I'm trying to get the base done now, and so just trying to get that set up correctly. What I decided is that the actual tailgate needed to be a little bit taller than what I had there. So since I was bulking out the tailgate, I just made that section a little bit taller. And then what I was able to do is put a thin filler strip on the backside. And then it actually gave me a nice lip to basically hang that tailgate off of. And then once it's all glued together, then you won't be able to see that seam. So I have a pretty much good functional truck here. There's still a lot more details to go, but all the basic pieces are there, and it's just adding in those details. So in the front I have the hood, the fenders, and this cowl piece now is placed on there. Still got a little bit of fill-in work here and there, but like I said, I'll get to that. The bed, I've gone back and added in some details. I'm working on the tailgate here. And so I just took a thinner piece of styrene. I've added on the little piece that'll be would have been the pivot point for the tailgate. And to extend it up a little bit, I just added on a piece of styrene to match this, a little bit thinner piece and a piece on the rail. I'll add in the details on the front and then just glue this on once I'm ready. On the inside, I added the little kind of bed rails here, and the little pieces, you know, along the back. Some angle pieces on the fender wells, and also, you know, so I kind of camouflage slightly the battery. So I got tape holding it in now, but essentially I just extended these rails down, and so, you know, casually when you're looking at it, the eye, you see these full rails. You don't really notice the cutout so much, but that's where the battery will be underneath. As you can see, more details to go, but I'm making good progress. So just continue on with that. So one of the tricks, you know, you can do to make it look like a stamped steel piece is to, you know, essentially cut these thinner sections out, you know, slightly sand and get the edge beveled down, and then glue them back onto the piece. And so when you're looking at it, especially after you get the paint on there, it really does look like it's a, you know, a stamped steel piece. If you really want to get tricked, then you can, you know, do the reverse on the inside to make it look like it's recessed. There's a lot of little details that go on this that really make it look like the original. One of these are these little supports on the side, and I think they're the stake side holes. And so, you know, you would have a cut in the top, and you would have these different, you know, stake sides that you could make, you know, for, you know, putting cattle or whatever you wanted in the back when you use this as a farm truck. So just taking, you know, these pre-cut styrene shapes, and I've started to get where I've just collected as many different, you know, sizes as I can, because they really are a very efficient way to make these parts, and it's so much better than trying to build this stuff up, and you get a much more accurate piece. So I finally got a really good picture of the tail lights that are on the one-to-one, and so it has this structure that bolts up underneath or is welded up underneath the cab in the rear, and it's just a box section with you know, two lights on each side. So here I'm just taking some styrene and making this box shape to look, you know, just like the real one. And what I'll end up doing is, you know, cutting a small hole and gluing a red tinted lens on the outside, and then drilling a small hole in the back for an LED. And so you'll have some brake lights in the rear. So it was fun to get back to doing a lot more scratch building on this one than what I have been done in the past. And so, you know, just kind of neat to make these little small pieces like this. Okay, so I am a pretty good stopping point here. I have most all of the major components for the body complete. In the rear, I have you know, a way to mount the bed. I still have to come up with something in the front, but it shouldn't be too big of a deal. I also have to do the interior, the dash, the roof. There's still a lot more to go, but I think the basic structure is here. And I've also been able to add some details for the bed. So I got the start of the tailgate. I still have to get the hinges finished up and then trim these down to length. Have these little pieces on the sides in there, and then I'll have to come back in and carve little notches in the top to represent where the stakes would go down. Just little pieces that need to be put on here and there, but majority is there. You also, like I said, the interior is complete, and I have this opening for the battery and this little piece that drops in and kind of camouflage where that would be. And I think in all, pretty good. Now the taillights, the way his are set up, I've seen different designs, but the way his is set up, it's got these little boxes that come down. I'm not sure if they were factory or somebody made these, but I'm trying to replicate what it looks like, so I made these to go, and these little red lights will go in, an LED in each side, so that should look pretty good. And all in all, very happy with how this is turning out. Really looking forward to getting this thing done, and can't wait to see it all complete. Got a lot of fun things coming up. Until then, we'll see you on the rocks.